Dear students, today we take up for discussion Austin's Positivism. John Austin, the famous English jurist, was born in 1790. At the age of 16, he joined the army and served as lieutenant up to 1812. Then he resigned and began studying law. In 1818, he was called to the bar. He practiced for 7 years. In 1826, when the University College London was founded, Austin was appointed as Professor of Jurisprudence. He delivered lectures there. First part of the lectures was published in 1832 under the title The Province of Jurisprudence Determined. Austin propounded his theory of law in his treatise Province of Jurisprudence Determined, which was republished posthumously by his wife Sarah Austin under the title Lectures on Jurisprudence in 1861. As Sarah Austin observed in her preface to the book, his early life in the army, though short, appears to have had its own impact on Austin's approach to jurisprudence. Austin followed the footsteps of his teacher Bentham. Like Bentham, Austin defined law in terms of sovereign and defined sovereign in terms of state. It cannot be denied that Austin took from Bentham the tool of analysis. The separation of law and morals is often regarded as the most prominent feature of Austin's theory. Austin's definition of jurisprudence. Austin defines jurisprudence as the philosophy of positive law. Positive law means actual law. Austin meant by positive law the law laid down by a determinate human superior or sovereign for the purpose of regulating the conduct of his subjects. That is, Austin emphasized that jurisprudence deals not with every rule of action, but only those rules which are laws properly so called, or what are called the laws of lawyers and law courts. By this emphasis on positive law, Austin wanted to determine the true scope and province of jurisprudence. General and particular jurisprudence distinguished. Austin refers to two aspects of jurisprudence, general and particular. By general jurisprudence, he means the philosophy of positive law, and by particular jurisprudence, he means the science of particular law or the science of any system of positive law prevailing in any country. General jurisprudence is concerned with the study of those fundamental principles which are common to the different systems of law prevailing in various countries. Particular jurisprudence is concerned with the underlying principles of the legal system of a particular country. Particular jurisprudence is the science of any actual system of law or of any portion of it. Austin, while recognizing that every system has its specific and particular characteristic differences, yet he discovered certain common similar general principles in all politically organized and developed or matured systems as distinguished from immature, backward or crude systems. He describes these common basic laws and principles as general jurisprudence as distinguished from specific local laws operating within one particular legal system as particular jurisprudence. In this manner, Austin classifies jurisprudence into two parts, general and particular. A legal system is the entire structure of laws in a political society. Every legal system may be found to rest on certain basic concepts and to contain a mass of working details. The working details may vary widely from system to system, but the basic concepts are common to all legal systems. For example, one legal system may provide that theft shall be punished with life imprisonment, while another system may provide that it shall be punished with imprisonment for 3 years. Here, the concept of theft being a punishable crime is common to both legal systems. One system may hold marriage to be a sacrament and therefore not terminable by divorce, while another system may hold it to be a mere contract terminable by divorce. But a recognition of marriage as foundation for legitimacy of offsprings and for inheritance of property is common to both. It may be found that certain legal concepts as crime and punishment, right and property are common to all legal systems. Such concepts are the basic elements of law. It is the province of jurisprudence to explore and explain such basic elements of law. That part of jurisprudence which deals with the basic elements of law which are common to all legal systems is called general jurisprudence. Particular jurisprudence can be described as a specific national jurisprudence which is distinct, different and separate from other legal systems. Particular jurisprudence is therefore the study of positive law of an individual legal system. The only practical jurisprudence is particular. Holland rejects Austinian division of jurisprudence into general and particular. According to him, science can never be particular. Assuming jurisprudence to be a science, he denies particularity to jurisprudence. Jurisprudence as a science should be treated as incapable of being divided into these two branches, general and particular. Austin's imperative theory of law. According to Austin, law in its most general and comprehensive sense means a rule laid down for the guidance of an intelligent being by an intelligent being having power over him. He said, a law in the most general and comprehensive acceptation in which the term in its literal meaning is employed may be said to be a rule laid down for the guidance of an intelligent being by an intelligent being having power over him. In this sense, law may be classified as laws properly so called and laws improperly so called. Laws improperly so called comprise two categories, laws by analogy and laws by metaphor. Laws by analogy are rules set out and enforced by mere opinion by an indeterminate body of men in regard to human conduct, such as the law of honor. Laws by metaphor are the laws that are observed by the lower animals, or laws determining the movements of inanimate bodies, for example, Newton's laws of motion. Austin subdivided laws properly so called into two types: laws set by God to men, which are called the divine law, and laws set by men to men, which are called human laws. Human laws are again classified by Austin into two types. They are laws set by political superiors and the laws set by others who are not political superiors. According to Austin, the laws set by political superior or the laws in strict sense are the positive law. The laws set by persons who are not political superiors are not laws in strict sense. They are merely positive morality enforced by public opinion in any society. These rules of positive morality are positive because they are of human origin, in contradistinction to those laws which are of divine origin or the divine law. And again, these rules are called mere morality. Austin described international law as positive morality. This is how Austin put a doubt as to the true nature of international law. According to Austin, positive laws are the subject matter of jurisprudence. Austin's trialogy. According to Austin, law strictly so called, that is positive law, is a command of a political superior or sovereign addressed to the members of a political society, followed by a sanction. In this sense, every positive law consists of three elements: command, sovereign, and sanction. Command. According to Austin, every law is a command. Austin defined command as follows: if you express or intimate a will that shall do or forbear from some act, and if you will visit me with an evil in case I comply not with your wish, the expression or intimation of your wish is a command. The command of the sovereign is a general command and not a particular command. A general command, according to Austin, relates to certain acts or forbearances of a clause and not to certain specific acts or forbearances. A command directing the people to get up at 6 a.m. tomorrow is a particular command, whereas a command requiring the people to get up at 6 a.m. daily is a general command. Command contains 7 elements. They are two parties, intention, intimation, duty, sanction, generality, and superiority. In a politically organized society, two parties relation do exist, such as governor and the governed, ruler and the ruled, sovereign and subjects. Command flows from superior authority and it is addressed to the people. Command is a will of the sovereign, which implies duty of the subjects. Command shall be a general command, not a particular command. Command is coupled with sanction. There is punishment or threat of punishment in case of disobeying a command. Sovereignty. Sovereignty means supreme power or authority. Etymologically, the term sovereignty is derived from the French word souverain, which means superiority. In this sense, sovereignty is relative in that it denotes the superiority of one as against the other. It is in this context that the higher courts are called court sovereigns. Originally, the concept of sovereignty was applied to denote the supremacy of a tribal chief or a personal monarch without any implications of absolutism or arbitrary power. Its subsequent application to and association with state power caused considerable confusion and controversy. A politically organized society within a territory to be called a state must have the sovereignty. Territory, population, government and sovereignty are the hallmarks of statehood. Writings of other jurists. The concept of sovereignty that emerged as an aftermath of Reformation was first articulated by the French philosopher Jean Bodin in 1576 in his book The Republica. Writing at a time when France was faced by faction and civil war, Bodin acutely felt the need for a strong and powerful monarchy. For him, the essence of statehood was supreme power of the government. However, Bodin did not champion arbitrariness. He defined a state as a multitude of families and their common possessions ruled by highest power and reason. The inclusion of reason as the basis of power clearly shows that Bodin was envisaging a governmental power that is subject to the control of the divine laws. It is to Thomas Hobbes that one must look as the chief exponent of absolutism. With Hobbes, the doctrine of sovereignty attained its full stature. In his famous work, Leviathan, Hobbes observed that man in the state of nature was nasty, brutish and selfish, and everybody was at war with all. The men needed for their security common power to keep them in one and to direct their activities to the common benefit. Law is the word of him that has by right the command over others. Law neither makes a sovereign nor limits his authority. It is might that makes a sovereign and law is merely what he commands. Sovereign cannot be limited by anything human or divine. His power is absolute and illimitable. It appeared plainly that the sovereign power is as great as possibly men can be imagined to make it. Thus, it is clear that while Bodin's sovereign was controlled at least by reason and divine laws, Hobbes' sovereign was absolute and unbridled. Austin's concept of sovereignty analyzed. The high priest of sovereign power was, however, John Austin. Austin's sovereign has two hallmarks. He is internally the repository of supreme authority, and externally he is totally independent. Austin combined both these notions in the oft-quoted definition. If a determinate human superior, not in the habit of obedience to a like superior, receive habitual obedience from the bulk of a given society, that determinate superior is sovereign in that society, and the society, including the superior, is a society political and independent. By stating that the sovereign is a human superior, Austin excluded God as a repository of authority. Divine law is no law as it is not set and enforced by a human superior. The implications of determinate superior are that Austin wants to keep out of purview vague and amorphous bodies like community and public opinion. An individual like a monarch or a body of individuals like a parliament can be sovereign, but not an indeterminate body like people. Sometimes it is fashionable to proclaim that sovereignty rests with the people. Dicey attempted a distinction between legal sovereign and political sovereign. The political sovereign will be people themselves, that is the electorate. This view, however attractive it may sound, is not immune to criticism. Locating political sovereignty in the people is purposeless. What matter is legal sovereignty? If people are sovereign, who are the subjects? This objection can be get over by pointing out that the people as a collectively are sovereign and that the people as individuals are subjects. However, people here means electorate, and from the standpoint of election, it would be unrealistic to make a distinction. As most democratic countries insist on adult franchise, the so-called people consists of only the eligible voters. Not all these voters would vote at any particular elections. Out of these who have actually exercised franchise, the way the majority of them has voted would be decisive. Thus, in the ultimate analysis, people means only the majority of the eligible voters. The so-called majority, in reality a minority of total population and sometimes a minority of even the eligible voters. In a country like India, the electorate comes into play once in 5 years, barring midterm polls. Exercise of sovereignty by the electorate once only in 5 years would not fit into Austin's theory of sovereignty. Austin's distinction between positive law and positive morality was that the former was set by a political superior and the latter was set by others who are not political superiors. In elaborating this notion, he evolved his theory of sovereignty. According to Austin, within a state, there can be only one sovereign, just as there cannot be two knives within a sheath. Sovereignty has a positive mark and a negative mark. The former is that as determinate human superior should receive habitual obedience from the bulk of a given society, and the latter is that the superior is not in the habit of obedience to a like superior. The sovereign receives obedience from his people. The obedience so received need not be from all the people all the time. It is only habitual obedience from the bulk of a majority of the people. Thus, the sovereign is internally supreme. Externally, the sovereign does not obey any other sovereign. He is totally independent. Austin further lays down three chief characteristic features of sovereign authority. They are: sovereignty is unlimited, illimitable, and indivisible. Sovereignty is unlimited. It extends to every person and thing situated within the territorial limits of a state. A sovereign can make any law. Sovereignty is illimitable. Law is the command of a sovereign. There can be no de jure or legal limitations or de facto constraints on the exercise of that power. For instance, in specific cases, no amount of application of force can secure total obedience to law. Again, the people can rebel against tyranny, but these limitations are intrinsic and not extrinsic. Austin went on to assert that a sovereign cannot command himself, that is, place himself under an obligation. The sovereign cannot be under a duty, since to be under a duty implies that there is another sovereign above the first who commands the duty and imposes a sanction, in which case the first is not sovereign. The power of sovereign is incapable of legal limitation. Sovereignty is indivisible. According to Austin, the sovereign enjoys plenum of sovereign power without sharing it with anybody. Division of sovereign authority amounts to destruction of the power itself. According to Austin theory, there can be only one sovereign in the state, that is to say, one person or the body of persons in whom the totality of sovereign power is vested. In other words, sovereign power is indivisible and cannot be shared between two or more persons or bodies of persons. The base of sovereignty is, according to Austin, the fact of obedience, which involves a relationship of sovereignty and subjection. Where there is no law, there is no sovereign. Where there is no sovereign, there is no law. Law is therefore a command issued by a political superior to whom the majority of members of society are in the habit of obedience, and which is enforced by a threatened sanction. Austin's concept of sovereignty criticized. Austin's concept of sovereignty is not free from criticism. It has been questioned whether it is necessary to have sovereign in a state. A sovereign may be necessary because definition has made it so. In another sense, the question is whether a sovereign is necessary as a practical matter. The short answer to the question is that there is no need for only one law-making body, though in practice this might be convenient. Salmond readily concedes that Austin's view that the sovereign must be determinate is correct. The repository of sovereign power should be ascertainable, but Austin's assumption that sovereignty is unlimited is open to question. For instance, under Indian Constitution, the sovereign power is divided vertically between the union and states and horizontally between legislature, executive and judiciary. The union legislature is sovereign in its own sphere. Apart from this, there are other limitations on both the union as well as the state legislatures. For instance, neither of them can make law taking away or abridging the fundamental rights. Thus, the distribution of legislative power, the separation of powers and constitutional limitations clearly demarcate the spheres of competence of the respective authorities. Disassignment or limitation of power is not a negotiation of sovereign power. It merely delineates the ambit or sphere of operation. What is necessary is that the authorities must enjoy full sovereign power within their respective spheres. Hence, sovereign power can be unlimited within limits. That is, sovereign power can be qualitatively unfettered within quantitative limits. Salmond points out that sovereign power is not illimitable. The Constitution lays down the limits of the exercise of sovereign power. These limitations are not merely de facto, but de jure. Austin himself conceded that there are de facto limitations on sovereign power. If de facto limitations do not mitigate against the sovereign power, there is no reason why de jure restraint should detract from that power. The attribute of indivisibility creates other difficulties. The question is whether sovereign authority can be vested in more than one body. The doctrine of distribution of legislative power and the theory of separation of powers are clear refutation of Austin's view that sovereign power is indivisible. Diaz pointed out that Austin confused between the de facto sovereign, or the body that receives obedience, and the de jure sovereign, or the body that makes the law. Both need not be the same. In England, the crown receives obedience from its subjects, but the parliament makes the law. Moreover, sovereign power may be vested in one, but exercised by another by way of delegation. Finally, the attribute of continuity may be questioned by asking where sovereignty resides during dissolution of parliament. Austin fell into contradiction in trying to anticipate the objection by saying that sovereignty lies with the Queen, Lords, and electorate. This is contrary to his assertion that it lies with the Queen, Lords, and Commons. Austin's theory of sovereignty cannot be brushed aside as irrelevant. It is a good starting point for identification of hallmarks of governmental authority as against lesser decision-making bodies. It is a good thumb rule. The theory can, however, be misleading if one were to attribute absolute power to the sovereign and to assume that the totality of sovereign power can be found in one individual or body of individuals. The theory fails when applied to modern democratic constitutions, wherein modern trend is not towards concentration of irresponsible power, but division and decentralization of power coupled with accountability. This lesson is an incomplete analysis of Austin's contribution to analytical legal positivism. Hence, it is continued and completed in the next lesson. Thank you.